Hey guys! Okay, this has been a while. It's Jordy and Chazz Michael Michaels and Dan. And we're back. It has been a hot second. And I'm going to blame it all on the COVID because everything that slowed down in life slowed down because there was a pandemic. I feel like it's completely justified. But now we've learned many things. Many things have changed during the pandemic. None of which have anything to do with Chazz. He's exactly the same. And Dan has been a guest before. He is, yes, my cousin, but also a prolific writer. Prolific. There's a whole series of books. There's going to be links to the books downstairs because he is really, I'm going to say an expert in neurology, which is something that's very interesting to me because as a meditation teacher, your neurology is the thing that needs some help. Because we come wired for three things. We come wired to keep ourselves safe. We come wired to procreate. Come wired to look for comfort. I mean, just seriously, look at this right now. This is all about comfort. Every one of us is a flaming, freaking asshole. That's right. That's right. We can be. And that may not be a bad thing. I mean, sometimes. But so I wanted to ask Dan to explain, because this has been very helpful to me, how your neurology impacts how you move through life. So welcome, Dan Weintraub.
Welcome.
And like I said, all his links below, and all these books, so interesting. But this one I'm really focused on today. It's Behaving Badly, the neurology of acting like an asshole.
Well, I'm glad to be here, living in LA, which is exciting. So the idea of behaving like an asshole is there's this place between sort of how we get ourselves to a place where we feel okay. We use the word homeostasis in sort of that neurological parlance where whatever neurotransmitters and hormones you're habituated to based upon your history, based upon how you're wired, we're all trying to get to a place where we feel okay. For one person, that place might be going to a stadium with 100,000 people and screaming at a football game and adrenaline and cortisol and noradrenaline, all this stuff coursing through that might be the place of homeostasis for somebody, right, where they feel okay. For somebody else, it might be very different. It might be much more of a cocktail of dopamine and endorphins and serotonin. And we're always on this quest in life to attenuate our neurological system. So when I go like this, I'm talking literally about everything that happens between our brain, our mind, our cerebral cortex, all the way down through our vagus nerve and into our gut and into our bodies. We're always trying to feel okay. The place where we can get into trouble is sometimes our way of feeling okay can be both destructive to us and turn us into assholes toward other people. An example would be the person who does go to the football game who's yelling and screaming and jumping up and down and it makes them feel good, and there's somebody next to them for whom that violent feeling is really hard, and they're not aware of that, and they're swearing and they're using all kinds of violent language.
That would be me in the stands sometimes. Like, especially when I used to, well, this is one of the examples of Dan's book. When I used to watch my kids play sports, I would become kind of an asshole. And every once in a while, something would slip out of my mouth like, screw you to the ref, or fuck you to the other side, the parents on the other team. And I never said that, probably. But like that kind of thing, that's where it crosses over a line. That's where you're like in somebody else's space.
And it's totally okay to think it, right? And the feeling is totally natural. It makes complete sense, neurologically, neurophysiologically, complete sense to have the desire, the impulse to scream at the referee. But when you cross over into action, that's when you risk really behaving like an asshole.
Yeah, and also, one of the things I feel is very interesting in Dan's book is he also talks about kind of people that are very politically active, and that the neurological response, that ability to become a real asshole, it has no political boundary. That there are people on all ends of the political spectrum who are doing what they, standing up for what they believe is right, talking about what they believe is right, yelling about what they believe is right, and they're having the same neurological response. So actually, we are more similar than different.
Well, yeah, I mean,
on that level.
In terms of my values, just ideologically, I live on the left, But I have to admit that the people who on the left and the people on the right, and the way they express their political views, their anger, their empowerment, their sense of what's right, justice, freedom, there's no neurological difference between hey, hey, ho, ho, racism has got to go and stop the steal. Once you kind of realize that there's no neurological difference between those two extremes, has given me anyway a little bit more compassion toward people who ideologically I'm very disparate from, but neurologically whom I share a lot of humanity with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know in my case, not to kumbaya the hell out of anything, but that there have been people that I absolutely have. And if we got into a political conversation, it would be over. And all the cortisol, all the things would be going crazy. I know that, and especially when it's people that are in my friend group, I just stay away from those topics. I have to, because I know neurologically I'm gonna lose control. Okay, so so the point of talking about all this is what can you do to not turn into a raving asshole that goes through life making enemies, destroying families, getting rid of the social connection, which in happiness studies, the number one thing that people talk about in the end that makes them happy is social connection. So what would you recommend? What can people do to kind of not turn their own world into an asshole central?
So developing practices that push us away from our neurological predisposition is important. I say hi to everybody. I say hello to everybody. I don't care who you are. I walk down the street, I say hi to people, I engage people in conversations, I'm not concerned with your ideology, etc. I make the connections. That builds in me with neuroplasticity, it builds in me a different way of reaching homeostasis than the anger place, than the adrenal place. I walk 3 to 5 miles every day. Walking is social, walking is communal, and it releases a little bit of endorphins because I'm getting some exercise, and that's a little bit more bliss-oriented. Another thing is that I try to build awareness over what's happening in my body. I've said this many times, it's in all of my books. I've recently been through a very painful end of a relationship, and oftentimes when people end relationships, the way that they try to feel okay is by painting a negative picture in their bodies and in their brains and in their minds about their ex. And that's a perfectly fine neurological strategy, except you cross over to being an asshole when you externalize it. So when you post on Facebook, oh, my ex is this, or when you send nasty emails, all that shit. And that's asshole land, right?
So I guess the moral of today's conversation is you don't need to be an asshole. It's not don't be an asshole, because that's all part of our nature. Our brain is wired that way. You're going to be an asshole every once in a while. It's fine. The point is to become aware of the feeling, the neurology. That's where me meditation, that will come in, because the more you meditate, my experience has been the less reactive I am, the less beholden I am to my neurology. And so things will go through my brain, and it's I can kind of see it. It's oh, I'd really like to tear that lady a new asshole. It would be so much fun, because she just took my fucking parking space. And I don't do that so much anymore.
If you do these practices, meditation, walking, saying hello to everybody, building awareness, you'll find that over time, you will, in my opinion, be less predisposed to acting like an asshole and behaving like an asshole, because it won't feel good anymore. Yeah. It's about me at this point. It's about me and my neurological health. And my neurological health depends on my releasing more of the bliss material and trying to attenuate the more edgy stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that, I'm going to thank Dan for being freaking brilliant and for not being an asshole. And if you want to be less of an asshole, I would highly recommend, there's a whole series of books. I'm going to put links down below that Dan has written all about this neurology thing. And it's you take the story out of things, and you know what? You can write a new story. You don't have to be such a flaming asshole. You can be an asshole once in a while, but why would you do that? So I don't know why you're still watching. Go practice being un-assholing yourself. Go practice, go take a walk, and get some of that bliss chemistry going. And come back, because you know what? I'm planning new stuff. I'm back. I don't feel like I was an asshole when I wasn't putting up new videos, but I definitely was not having as much fun. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Dan, and I'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.